So, all right, welcome to the Local Pickup, where we talk about guitars and then we give a little bit of money to charity. So today we're going to talk about the Les Paul. This is a 1989 Les Paul. This was actually purchased for me brand new in 1990. It had sat there for a year by my parents, which is crazy because I was 14 and this is like, it's like an expensive guitar. It was a really big deal for me, and I'd been playing for a few years on some cheap Charvel and didn't know the difference, and they decided to give me a guitar, and I just picked it out because I thought it was purty and I didn't really know anything about it. But
really?
Yeah, I mean, I really didn't do my homework or anything. They were just, anyway, I just picked it out, and it was very fortunate, and I've had it ever since. So luckily I didn't trade it, sell it, anything, but it's 1989 Les Paul. These are made out of mahogany wood, and then they have a maple top. They've got humbucking pickups. Now humbuckers are, they buck hum, that's where the name comes from. So a single coil pickup has that, like a Telecaster or a Stratocaster, you plug it in and it goes like that hum. Well, these you plug it in and there's not that noise, It's because they've got these dual coils that are canceling out the hum, and that's why they call them humbuckers. But Gibson kind of pioneered those pickups, and it's got the pearl, hexagonal inlays, and this one has Grover tuners, which actually most of them don't come with Grover tuners. They don't come with the silver tuners. They come with like that opaque kind of like whitish. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, they look old.
Ship
Yeah. Exactly. And that's normal. But this actually came from the factory with these Grover tuners on them, which a lot of people upgrade to Grovers. But anyway, that's how it came. But I've had this guitar forever, man. And I've played it in all the bands I've been in, all the way up until the band I'm in most recently, which I play a different guitar. But I took the pick guard off. But it's just beautiful tobacco sunburst. And
thus proving the lack of need for it. Because
I
there
know.
are no scratches there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it looks way better without it. I mean,
I guess it's just how you play it.
It is how you play. I mean, I don't know, whatever. But it's a guitar I'm never gonna like sell or anything. So a few scratches I don't mind. I mean, it's a player for me. But I just think it looks beautiful without it. I love this tobacco sunburst on this maple top. You can see the wood grain in it, and a lot of them you'll see have that burst, that tiger striping, that like has those stripes that go sideways in it. And I think this one's cool because it doesn't have that. You just see the natural wood in the guitar. But anyway, the story of these. Of Les Pauls is that Les Paul himself is a jazz musician, and he's credited as inventing the electric guitar. There's a lot of Adolf Rickenbacker also kind of invented the electric guitar too. George Beauchamp with him, but anyway, here's what Les Paul did. He was playing in a jazz band. This is in like the 20s, right, and the 30s, and like everybody, he couldn't be heard. And we've talked about this before. You couldn't hear them, and so they're a background instrument. And so he kept trying to find ways to be heard. And actually,
was he just playing like an acoustic guitar?
Yeah, so like an archtop jazz
with
guitar.
Little F holes and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Acoustic guitar, and it's a hollow body acoustic so that it can project sound, but it's just not loud enough.
Yeah.
For a band. I mean, you got a drummer and you got all kinds of instruments. And so a violin can be loud, piano could be very loud. That's why it was always at the forefront, because it could be loud.
Yeah.
And guitars just couldn't, so they never thought of as a forefront instrument. But some of these guitarists were just insanely good. I mean, like a Les Paul or somebody, and they're looking for ways to project with their instrument. So as they're inventing these pickup technologies that can project sound from sound waves and string vibrations, Les Paul, he realizes if he takes the needle off of his record player, this is when he was like a teenager, and he hooks it to some of these technologies, that the needle could pick up the vibration of the sound and project it through an amplifier, and he could be at home and play through his record player.
Wow.
Yeah, and so he figured this out on his own, and he did it on a hollow body guitar, but the vibration of the top of the hollow body guitar and the vibration of the strings created a feedback loop that was just out of control. So what he did was he got like a railroad tie. I mean, I'm talking a solid metal, because he figured the densest material possible would be best. So he gets a railroad tie and he puts his technology, his little pickup technology on it, and plays it as a railroad tie, almost like a lap steel. And he said it was the most beautiful sound he's ever heard. He says that in interviews and stuff when you can look him up online. He says that. But he always tells this story that somebody told him, the day I see a cowboy on a horse picking a railroad tie, in other words, how heavy that is, which is funny because Les Pauls are so heavy, So what he did is he invented what is now famously known as the log. So what he did is he took a 4x4, and it was just a 4x4. He put his pickups on it and his tuners at the top and ran the strings, and it was just a 4x4, and it looked ridiculous, and it didn't look like a Spanish-style guitar. So he was in Epiphone's, out in California, he was in Epiphone's manufacturing place. They were already making guitars. And he cut the sides off of an Epiphone like this, and he stuck them on the side of his log for no purpose at all, just to give it the Spanish style that we look at visually and say, that's a guitar. Yeah. And he put that on the side so people wouldn't make fun of him. But it was a solid 4x4.
Did they still make fun of him?
They still made fun of him. So check this out. This was in the 30s, man. No, this was probably and he probably took it to Gibson in maybe 42 or something. So he takes it to Gibson, who was a big guitar maker at the time. And they were making really well-made acoustic instruments. And
So Les Paul didn't invent Gibson?
No. So Epiphone.
Honestly, I've never. They're inextricably linked.
Yeah, exactly. So he was a famous guitarist. Gibson was already making hollow body, archtop guitars, acoustic guitars for a long time. They've been a maker. Actually, Epiphones even before them, and they were competing with Harmony and Kay and Epiphone and all this. And then he goes to them because he knew that crowd, and he says, "You need to make a solid body electric guitar." This is before the Telecaster had come out. This was in the 40s. And they were hemming and hawing about it. You know, it's corporate meeting, board meeting, this, that, and the other. And in the meantime, Leo Fender comes out with a Telecaster, and everybody starts playing it because they could be heard.
Yeah.
And it just blows up. And so, you know, Leo Fender's version is this super working man, simple guitar. Well, Gibson decides they're going to make a higher end, more complicated electronics, more elegant design, more elegant bridge. Everything about it is more complicated, more elegant, better, you know, higher quality woods, bindings, everything to make it just a more beautiful instrument. And they're going to come out and kind of show Fender what's up. And they came out, and it was very successful as well, but it was very heavy. But that heaviness gives it some of its tones. Here, you can pick on it a little bit. It gives it, it's like really, I think I got the knobs down here. Yeah. It's got a deep quality about it. It's got a, a heavier quality than it doesn't have that slappy twanginess of a Fender.
Yeah, it's a full on. That's what you want to do. You just want to play.
I mean, you want to have your arm in the air, and you think about, you know, the Jimmy Pages and the Peter Framptons.
Yeah. It's a big, meaty guitar.
It is a big, heavy, meaty guitar. Yeah.
I'll say for me, it's definitely the first guitar I ever wanted. To me, this is the electric guitar. The Les Paul for me is like. Now you see a lot of people with Stratocasters and stuff, but as soon as I saw this when I was becoming educated about guitars, it's just because it seems like just the biggest, fullest.
Yeah.
It's a monster.
It is.
And it's funny because it's like the biggest kind of acoustic guitar, the shape of it and stuff, but it's just condensed in this little rock of like.
Oh yeah, and it's heavy, man, and I like that about it. You know, if you think about it, the Les Paul shape and the Stratocaster shape are the two most copied shapes.
Right, yeah. So
when you think about just what a guitar looks like in the abstract, it either looks like a Strat or it looks like a Les Paul.
Right.
You know?
And definitely I see, as you talk about it, I see the relationship between this shape and a more traditional acoustic guitar, and you know, almost like the Gibson 175, which is basically the shape of an acoustic guitar with the cutaway down here, so you can do one of those. But it definitely isn't. I don't even remember when it hit me when I was young and learning about guitars. I just immediately latched on to like, this is the best guitar. And
I mean, it's legendary. And I think people are kind of in one camp or the other often, you know, if they're in Fender camp or Gibson camp. But, you know, it's funny, man, like the history of this thing. So when it came out in the 50s, it was a huge success, and again, it was the answer to Leo Fender's guitar. It was, again, not the cheaply made guitar. It was super nice, and it was the gold top came out at first, and it was like that's why people love the gold top. That was the only thing that came out. At first. And then what happened was the 1958-59 Les Paul gold tops are probably the most sought after guitars in the world. I mean, they sell for $250,000 kind of guitars, you know. because what happened in 1961, and this is crazy, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about the SG. In 1961, Gibson changed the shape of the Les Paul without asking Les Paul. And they changed it to the SG shape, what we know as the SG.
Oh, I see.
And it was, and so for that 1 year, you can still find them. They're crazy expensive, but it's a Les Paul standard, and it looks like an SG.
Yeah.
It's a 1961.
I think Yamaha took that specific design. And there's a lot of Yamaha kind of Les Paul styles like that have the double cutaway. It's funny, I didn't know. I don't think I ever actually knew that about the Gold Top. But I know it was for me. I'm of an age where there's you have this particular window when you're like an adolescent where you're exposed to certain things that just make an imprint on you.
Yeah.
And I'm of an age where it was just like Social Distortion was having that sort of like, I guess their second big wave where they'd done their 80s thing, and then the late 90s after like Mike Ness cleaned up. And he, to me, just seemed like the coolest guy ever. And he always had like a Gold Top Les Paul. It was. I remember being in high school when he was doing the like all the late night shows and stuff. And also it was probably the first time me getting exposed to like punk rock that wasn't like that idea of like the like, or just like the Sex Pistols like. It was like, oh, these guys are punk rock, but they're just like their songs are really catchy and they're a little bit country. And they have like actual legit like guitar solos or just like super melodic guitars. But all the guitars just sound like. I was used to the idea of just like garage band dirtiness in guitars. And I don't know, Social Distortion is the first time I remember just like seeing someone playing a guitar and playing punk music that was melodic, and the guitar just sounded so huge. And like just thick and just powerful. And
well, I remember seeing, I remember growing up and seeing like all the Strat players like Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton and all that. It's like, oh, if you're a great guitarist, you played a Stratocaster. But then Jimmy Page always stood apart from them in my mind as an eccentric, weird dude playing crazy stuff that wasn't traditional blues rock solos. It was something strange. And to see him play a Les Paul just blew me away. And then right before I got into punk, I was still liking like Motley Crue and Rat. When Appetite for Destruction came out, Guns N' Roses, it was just before I discovered punk. So I was still like allowed to like kind of metal. I say that laughingly. But and that album came out, and like Sweet Child of Mine came out and all that, and Slash playing that Les Paul, it was just so iconic, man.
And the thing is, I don't even know if it's just psychological at this point that I just have decided that Les Pauls are, it's just a beefier, it's just a bigger sound. And a lot of those kind of, when I was really young, a lot of those kind of 90s radio bands, the lead guitar players would always have Les Pauls. And I mean, I would just like hear it on the radio, and there was just a distinctive sound just repeatedly when I was like in the early age of the internet going to discover like, oh, I love the way the guitar sounds in this hilarious whatever one-hit wonder radio band, and this one, and repeatedly I would
look it up
and it was a Les Paul.
That's fun. That's like me and Iron Maiden. Like, so as metal progressed, they moved away from your standard Gibson and Fender and into the more metal like kind of brands, like Ibanez, PRS, Charvel, Jackson, whatever those things are. But I've never been into those brands. But when I go back to what I consider to be the grandfather of metal, and I go to Iron Maiden, and they've got double Les Pauls, and they're doing double solos of Les Pauls. It's just like, yes, man.
Well, I know. Well, the thing is, it's like, I just growing up, I was never really into like shredders, and I liked melodic guitar stuff. And the thing is, if you're playing a Strat or a smaller kind of just thinner guitar, it makes sense to me that you're just flying around there's a million notes flying out. But with like a Les Paul, you can sort of be in that. I mean, my favorite guitarists are the ones that they sort of hang in that area between a riff and a full-on solo. And they're sort of finding this. Cracker was a huge deal to me. Which, the Johnny Hickman from Cracker, he always played a Les Paul, and his all of his guitar work was so like, he just would write a riff for every song. It was a super catchy riff, and then he would go into the solo that was just expansion of the riff, and that was just. That's very kind of probably obscure personal experience, but it defines that kind of like that heavy, thick. Even when you're down here playing like low notes, the Cure is another, and they don't play Les Pauls, but the Cure have a lot of that. They play Chet Atkins and baritone guitars, but they're all about these sort of, even when the higher notes just feel heavy. As opposed to just having to be down here. When you play a Les Paul,
it's got like a fullness about it.
And I mean, not far removed from the Telecaster, honestly. I don't
Yeah.
know how the Telecaster does what it does.
Yeah.
It defies physics, but
But the Telecaster has a snappier thing going on
Yeah,
that the
yeah,
Les
yeah.
Paul doesn't have. Yeah, that
Yeah.
snappy country thing.
Yeah.
But so the story goes that after they introduced the '61 Les Paul, which was the birth of the SG, Les Paul didn't like it, and he was like, "I don't want my name on that." So they took his name off of it, and they didn't have a name for it, and so SG stood for solid guitar, which we'll talk more about. But and so they just moved that to be the SG, and they didn't make the Les Paul for like 5 years or something, and then they reintroduced it in the late '60s, and it opened the floodgates that everybody wanted a Les Paul. The fact that you couldn't get one for a few years,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, the magic of that. And ever since then, man, ever since the late '60s, it has been, it and the Strat have been the two dominant guitars for sure.
Yeah, that's always
Yeah.
been clear to me.
Yeah.
Early on.
And I played when, like I said, and I played in punk bands and stuff, and I didn't know, like I wasn't a guitar, like I'm talking about all this stuff retrospectively. I mean, back then I didn't like study guitars. I mean, I was a punk rock kid. I mean, I just loved it because I thought it was heavy, it was thick, and it was full and loud. You know?
Well, all the pictures from the Minor Threat discography, where it's like taped down, so it's like a bridge pickup.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, it's got the bridge pickup, which is more trebly, and then this gives you that bass here. And the three-way switch in the middle gives you both pickups. I always played it up.
Yeah,
give it that bass
that
here.
full swing. It's interesting. We're both. Most people seem to be always playing the bridge pickup. It seems to me.
Really.
I love the sound of the neck pickup.
I do
It's so
too.
warm and full sounding.
I do too. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because when you're playing, I will say for sure, if you're just kind of playing around on a guitar by yourself, I think it makes a lot more sense to play the neck pickup. You know,
Yeah.
I understand that sometimes like the bridge can kind of cut through a little more.
Yeah, because
If
it
it's a full
EQs it
band.
against the bass and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. I tend to muddy it up probably to a fault because I like that sound.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So, well, cool, man. So that's the Les Paul, the story of the Les Paul, and that's my Les Paul. I'll never part with this guitar, dude. Not on purpose. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to give a little bit of money to a nonprofit. We use an app. We built an app called Givolio. You can go to givolio.com and check it out. You can find any nonprofit organization in the United States, any 501c3. You can organize them however you want. Like if you got some that are about maybe animals, some geared towards children, some that are maybe local to you, or whatever the case. Create different portfolios, and you can set up different giving to those portfolios. So you can give $5 a month to your animal-related portfolio, or $10 a month to this, $2 a month, $100 a month, whatever is comfortable for you. Manage it all yourself, and you can print out your tax report at the end of the year, no problem. You can do all this from your phone or a desktop, givolio.com. We're very proud of it. And what we're going to do now is Chris is going to select a nonprofit organization, tell us a little bit about it, and we'll give a little bit of money. See if we can make a difference. Small, but, making a difference. There you go, Chris.
Every episode we pick a different one, different nonprofit to give to. Because one of the great things about Givolio is you're able to discover nonprofits that you otherwise might not have ever heard of. So we try to look for a little more like obscure, interesting kind of nonprofits, smaller nonprofits to give to. There's a really cool one that's called Freedom Fences, which they actually go into communities and identify dogs that are living outside on like short encumbered chains or just inadequate shelter, and they offer kennels and safer, more comfortable places for animals to live in. And they do a bunch of other sort of pet care nonprofit stuff. But it's just a really cool thing to, if you see animals are being neglected or whatever, and maybe, it's a family that a lot of times, if it's like a low-income family that they love having pets, but they don't necessarily have the resources to take care of them. I mean, pets are a really valuable thing to any family, and if a family's underprivileged, they might not always have the resources.
It's expensive, man.
Yeah, and so it's a really cool, Freedom Fences, it's a really cool nonprofit that tries to help, so that it's just like, it's not like only, families that have the means and resources can take care of and own.
And
pets.
Education on what's good for a pet.
Exactly, yeah. So maybe, you're not, depending on your experience, you might not understand quite what, for your animal's needs or whatever. So it's a great way to, keep people who want to have pets and are well-meaning but don't have the resources to provide them with the resources to take care of their animals.
Cool. Well, good selection, man. And we'll see you next time on the Local Pickup.